Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric, and thank you for joining me this week where I have a bunch of stuff to talk about in the world of Star Trek. So first, I want to review the 6th episode of the final season titled The Bounty, which I really did enjoy for many reasons, not just because it was filled with references. I also want to talk about the future of the characters in the Star Trek universe, including those on Picard, and how that may be beginning to take shape. Also, both Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman made comments in the past week about new Star Trek projects and release dates, which I think points to a big announcement in the near future. And then finally, I want to talk about one of these reported new ideas and why I think it could work or flop as a new series. So first, let's talk about the 6th episode of the final season of Picard titled The Bounty. As I just said, I really did enjoy the episode. I mean, it was filled with references. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, a YouTube channel that is all about references and Easter eggs, the creator of that channel would probably like this episode. So yeah, I did, but it wasn't just because of the references, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But I think that one thing that's important to note about this episode is that before the season, the first 6 episodes of this season were sent to critics so they could kind of like get a feel of the season. And you don't do that as a studio unless you're pretty psyched about what you've got. So I think that, Terry Matalas and the people at Paramount knew that this season would stand above, the first 2 seasons of Picard, that these characters and this story would resonate with a lot of fans of Star Trek, and it definitely has. I mean, like I said, I don't think that the references and the characters are just there to show up for one episode. Everything has its place, and everything seems to be moving in a good direction. It's not without its flaws. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect season of television. I'm not going to be one of those critics, but I do think that it's way better than the first 2 seasons. It's definitely one of the best new things from Trek that we've gotten in a while. I'm not someone that hates everything that's new Trek. If this is the first time you've ever found my channel, I actually do really like Strange New Worlds. I really like Lower Decks. So I think that those are, far from failures, even though neither is as popular as I think they deserve. Prodigy is a show that I don't really like that much. I don't think it's really made for me. There's different theories about like if that Prodigy is still for kids or if it's kind of morphed in between the first and second half of the first season to incorporate more of the, adult fan base. I'm not a huge fan of Prodigy, so I'll say that. I wasn't a huge fan of the first 2 seasons of Picard. When it comes to Discovery, I like, up to about the burn, and then after the burn, I'm not a huge fan. So I'm not one of these like everything in Star Trek is awesome or everything in Star Trek sucks. But I do think that this season is really good. And, and this episode really kind of encompasses everything that this season I think is trying to do. They're trying to incorporate this new story and quite a few new characters into the ethos of these characters and this narrative that we've known for, 20 years, or even longer. And I think it's been really successful. So, as I mentioned, I loved all the Easter eggs, and I loved specifically that, it looked like the Easter eggs that were in the Fleet Museum were kind of different than they were in Daystrom Station. Like the Fleet Museum was more like just the fun Easter eggs, like, oh, look at that ship, look at that ship. I mean, it was just cool to see everything. Daystrom, on the other hand, kind of had like a sinister vibe to it. You were kind of like peeking your head everywhere just to see everything. At the Fleet Museum, everything was kind of out in the open. All the ships were surrounding the station, so they were pretty easy to see. Where in Daystrom, you kind of had to like freeze the frame and like look off the reflection of another mirror, like to try and figure out everything in the station. So I thought that was really cool. And those references, they were nice to see, but they also had a point to the story. The cloaking device on the Bounty, what the episode was named after, was how the Titan was able to get away. So that ship being there had a purpose, and those ships, as a whole being there had a purpose. So it was very cool, just like how Riker on Daystrom was able to get past security by remembering his first meeting with Data. And it wasn't just, a member berry, all these references to Data before we actually got the reveal. I thought that was, really well done. And that's the best way to use Easter eggs. I think that was the worst part of the 2nd season of Picard, because I thought the premise was good. It felt very Star Trek. It felt like a Star Trek movie. I love Q. And I still think that maybe the Q aspect of the 2nd season is the best part of it. But, I felt a lot of times that a lot of the references were just there to be there. They weren't there to really add to the story. And I don't see that really happening. Even in Daystrom Station, when we pass by that panel and it says the body of Captain Kirk is there, at first I was like, that's cool, but then like, why would Kirk be there? Like immediately my brain, it's kind of like remembering the second season of Picard, like, oh, I bet that's just one of those things that's just thrown in there. But then later in the episode, we find out that Jean-Luc Picard's body is there too, and that moves the plot along. So it actually does make sense for us to see Captain Kirk's body first, because later on we get to see that Picard's body is there as well. So again, just really well done. I really dug how Easter eggs were really incorporated well into the overall story. I also really like that this was the first episode where we had all the returning cast members in a new scene. It wasn't like archive footage or something like that. The only cast member that hadn't shown up yet was Brent Spiner. And of course, he was a main part of the third act of the story. And then we had Marina Sirtis show up at the end. She's been in a couple episodes already on like a view screen, and I think it was in a flashback. So this was the first time we saw everybody. But as I pointed out on my breakdown, that might not have been Troy at the end of that episode. Again, we're dealing with changelings, and they can change into anyone. We never saw the Shrike actually go get Troy, so it's kind of weird that she just showed up on the ship. And again, because they're changelings, they can be anybody. So this could be a changeling Troy, but I think that's kind of obvious. So either they're going to address that at the beginning of the episode, and we're going to know that that's Troy. But anyway, back to my original point of that we had all the cast members return in this episode. So it was really cool, even though they didn't all get to be in the same room together, but we did get, Worf reuniting with Riker and Picard and others. So it was cool to see that. And, of course, Geordi LaForge as well. So it was a really nice kind of feel good episode in that way too. And again, I just mentioned this, but Worf and Rafi, being on the Titan kind of converges the two storylines that we've been following so far this season. I always like that in a story, when you have these two or you have many storylines kind of acting at the same time, independent of each other, and then you kind of get them to converge. Even though we have Worf leave at the end of the episode, it was still cool to see, all those reunions and kind of everybody getting together to move towards, a single goal. Another thing that I kind of liked in this episode, and it's kind of been going on this season, I don't know if you've noticed, is that everyone seems to hate Chateau Picard. Like I remember in the first season, Picard gave a bottle to Rafi, and she seemed pretty psyched about it. But it seems like everyone else makes a comment about how they either don't drink wine or they don't like Chateau Picard. In this episode, it was Worf. I know Jack said something about it as well. So I think it's kind of funny how, Jean-Luc has this winery and he expects everybody to enjoy it and he gives it to people and they're like, yeah, we don't like it as much as you think we do. It might really be kind of a funny kind of way to reference the narrative of this whole season, how the characters from the Next Generation are learning that their legacy is not really what they thought it would be, or even what they think it is now, that they did leave, some scorched earth behind them. And that's coming back this season, and now they have to deal with it. So I just think that's funny that how every time Jean-Luc mentions Chateau Picard, people are always ragging on it. So maybe it's not as good as we're meant to think it is. And then my final note about something I liked in the episode was I loved at the end, Worf going on that like Ronin ninja mission to retrieve Riker. Worf and Riker have had an interesting past. Worf, of course, had a relationship with Deanna Troi, so that's always, I think, kind of been weird. And Riker's kind of always picked on Worf, I think. I've mentioned that in a couple of my videos, that there are instances where Riker seems to pick on Worf. In this episode, in fact, Riker picks on Worf. I think that it's cool that Worf was like, no man or beast or God stand in my way. I thought that was just awesome. Another great Worf line that we get. And I love his character this season. I think Michael Dorn is doing a really great job. And if they do continue on with any of these characters or the storyline or anything past Picard, I really hope that Michael Dorn is a part of it. I don't think that he needs to be a main character. And I think maybe he works better as not a main character. Like maybe you just have specific, 3-episode arcs or something that has something to do with like a Klingon thing, and it has something to do with Worf. And then there really were just a couple of things that I didn't really care for. The first thing, and this I thought of as soon as he showed up, I wish Moriarty wasn't in the trailer for this season. Nothing against the performance of Daniel Davis in this episode. By the way, did you know that he's not English, that he's from Arkansas? I never knew that. He does an English accent great. And I know I've seen him in other things. He's in that show, The Nanny, and I'm pretty sure he has an accent in that too. So amazing. He's from Arkansas. Anyway, great actor. But I like his performance as Moriarty, as short as it was. I really think that that would have hit so hard if he wasn't in the trailer. Just think about, you hear him say, "I think, therefore I am." You know how it's black, and then you see his face. If you that wasn't ruined in the trailer, how awesome would that have been to see in this episode the first time around? Maybe it was a situation where the producers at Paramount were forced to flip a coin and say, either we're revealing the return of Rolaren or we're revealing Moriarty. And I really would have liked if Moriarty was just, in this episode and we didn't know about it in the trailer. I also am kind of confused at what part he played in this episode. At first, when they showed him in the trailer, my guess was that he was going to be what defeated the AI at Daystrom, and that Daystrom would be Data or Lore or whatever. And to a certain point, I think that was correct, but I don't know. I'm not sure if Moriarty was the thing that they used to get past the AI, or if Moriarty was used by Data or whatever remains of Data's consciousness to tell Riker and them where or how to find him. I kind of got lost for me in the episode. And I watched the episode twice and I still couldn't figure out after a second watching. So maybe if you understand it better, you can let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know. But yeah, when it comes to Moriarty, I think the actor did a great job. I think the reveal was all right, but it would have been way better if it just wasn't in the trailer. And then the second thing I didn't really care for was that I don't understand if we're supposed to be made to believe that the Uromatic syndrome that Jack has, that he got from Picard, is supposed to explain his behavior. Like, his eyes lit up, he killed 4 changelings at once. Was that a dream? I don't understand if that was just like a stopgap in the plot for like the audience. Like, just don't think about that this episode. Like, we're not gonna deal with that. We're not gonna deal with that part of Jack in this episode. So just kind of put a pin in that, and we'll get back to that, and we'll talk about it in later episodes, because they kind of passed it off as like, yeah, that's why Jack's having these dreams. But I really think he did kill 4 changelings. So I don't know if we're supposed to be made to believe that it is the Uromatic syndrome that did this, but I don't think that that's the case. So I don't know, maybe that got lost on me too. I think that the way that the episode was written and structured, it was made to kind of make the audience just think like, oh yeah, that's why that happened. Just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it right now. Certain parts of this season, it is kind of just fun. And it's like, just don't think about it that much. If you start to think about it too much, things aren't going to make a lot of sense. Kind of like, why was there a cloaking device on a Klingon vessel in a museum where like anybody could grab it? But yeah, it's good fun. And it definitely, all in all, I think it was a great episode. I think it's a really good season. I look forward to the last 4 episodes. We only have 4 episodes left. And I know that the next 2 episodes went out as screeners, and a lot of reviewers are saying that there's a lot of emotionality filled in these episodes. So this may be where we lose one of the cast members. I don't know, but that's kind of what it's looking like to me. But let me know, what do you think of this episode? What do you think of the season of Picard so far? And are you excited for the rest? So next, I want to talk about what should be the next live series that we see in the Star Trek franchise, and that is Star Trek Strange New Worlds. The executive producer of that show, Akiva Goldsman, spoke at MIT, and he had a very interesting quote. He said this: "Today or tomorrow, we're announcing the air date of the 2nd season of Strange New Worlds, which we filmed like 17 years ago. And you'll be really surprised because we just went all over the place, and we've just started filming the 3rd season now." So when he says that we filmed like 17 years ago, what you may not know, or you may know, is that they actually filmed the 1st and 2nd season of Strange New Worlds back to back. They did the same thing with Picard. They filmed the 2nd season and the 3rd season of Picard back to back, mostly due to like COVID restrictions and stuff like that, and having actors travel and creating, bubbles. So that's why he's kind of frustrated, understandably, that it's been filmed so long ago and nobody's seen it yet, because I think they finished filming in March of last year. So it's been about a year since, it's been done filming. And then, of course, they had post-production. But the fact that he said that it's going to be announcing it any day now is great news. He made this comment about a week ago, so he was wrong on the exact timing. But I'm going to get back to that. But it is good to know that season 3 is also in production. We haven't even heard that season 3 has been greenlit yet. I think it's pretty obvious, though, that it was. Considering that Picard is done after this season, we know that Discovery is done after their next season. So if Strange New Worlds was done after the 2nd season, there'd be no live action Star Trek on right now. So I think that not only is Strange New Worlds coming back, it's now like the flagship production of the Star Trek catalog. And it's good to hear that season 3 has begun production, because this means that we could see season 3 possibly around this time in 2024, which is great news. This also means that we could possibly see a trailer very soon for the second season. So far, we've only seen like a short cutscene that really didn't show us anything about the season as a whole. So it would be nice to get a full trailer in the near future. And when I say near future, I think that that could mean as quickly as next week, because as I'm taping this, next week is April 5th, and April 5th is known as First Contact Day. That's the day in the future where Vulcans made contact with the people of Earth. And in the past, Star Trek has made announcements around these like sort of pseudo Star Trek holidays. So I think it's a really good chance that on April 5th, we will get all this Strange New Worlds information and possibly even a trailer. I can almost guarantee that we will be getting a trailer, because I don't know why they wouldn't just go out and confirm what Akiva Goldsman has said. They're probably just prepping a trailer, finishing the VFX, and making it so it can be viewed on April 5th. So my guess is that it will be April 5th, that we will get a trailer for Strange New Worlds, and we will get further confirmation that season 3 is a go. But along with this information about Strange New Worlds, we also could be hearing bigger announcements about the future of Star Trek. And this is coming from Alex Kurtzman himself at an interview he did with SFX magazine. So when they asked him specifically about future projects coming soon, Alex Kurtzman said this: "We have plans for new things. There's quite a few plans, and you'll hear about them soon. We will continue to expand the Star Trek universe, absolutely." So what this tells me is that there's definitely either a new series or a movie announcement in the very near future. I've made my feelings known about a movie in the past. I don't think that Star Trek needs a movie right now, but it always sounds like they're trying to get it made. I know that Chris Pine is doing press for the new Dungeons and Dragons movie that I really want to see, and people are asking him about Star Trek, and he says that he wants to return, but really that doesn't mean anything. I mean, any actor is going to say they want to return. That's like asking a YouTuber if they want a video to go viral. I mean, of course, if it resonates with an audience, yes, that's good. Like that's why like an actor does this, So if people want to see him return as Captain Kirk, hell yeah, Chris Pine's going to return. I don't think he did a bad job. And I think it might get confusing now that Paul Wesley is playing James Kirk on Strange New Worlds. So I think that might be holding up any plans for another Kirk returning and another Spock returning in a movie. But I think that something that is interesting is that, especially in the last week, a lot of talk has been made about a new series following the characters on Picard. At first, they were calling it Star Trek Titan, and now they're calling it Star Trek Legacy. And by they, I mean fans and people that work on the show. But specifically, when Alex Kurtzman was asked about the future of the characters on Picard, he said this: "By the way, even individual characters, I think we could absolutely continue to tell stories about individual characters that are set up on the show in other contexts. That's the beauty of having a universe now, is that in a perfect world, we're just not doing seasons of television, we're doing event series. We're doing single events that could be 2-3 hours long. I think that we are now at a place where that's really possible." So that's really interesting. First of all, saying that we could see a future for the characters on the Titan. Because I know that I'm not the only one that is a fan of the characters that we've, met this year on Star Trek Picard. And I would like to see them, continue on in a new series, as long as it made sense. And the fact that he's saying that it could be like an event series, 2 or 3 hours long, I think is really smart. It keeps your productions down. It keeps the ROI down, the return on investment. You don't need as much to really justify making something, and it could still be very popular. I think there's a higher ceiling there when you have less in the game. So I think that that's a really good idea, and I think it speaks to the fact that they don't need a movie. But when asked about a movie, this is what Alex Kurtzman had to say about the future of a Star Trek film. We talk about that all the time. Is there a movie version? Doing a movie is different. It's 2 hours, right? So it's different than doing 10 being 10 episodes. Anything is possible, truly. So I think that that's kind of a brush off, honestly, by Alex Kurtzman. I think that's kind of like, yeah, it's possible. I mean, but he just mentioned to the interviewer how he has another idea about doing event series. So I think that that's really where Kurtzman's head is at, is that he wants to do a smaller kind of event. MCU has done this. They've done like specials that are only one episode. They've even done 6-episode series where the actual content is about 40 minutes. So it does kind of condense down to a 3 or 4 hour, kind of event, so to speak. So I think that that's really smart. I think that that would be cool to do. He was also asked, Alex Kurtzman, about a Section 31 series. This is something that is gaining more and more momentum the more that Michelle Yeoh gets, accolades for her movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. And everyone wants to see her come back. And they know, like I do, that having a face like that as part of Star Trek gives you so much credibility. She's on top of the world right now. So having her come back and lead a series, I think would be really smart. And I think it's also worth noting that in Star Trek Picard this season, and really over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of mention of Section 31. If you remember before that, they only were mentioned really in Deep Space Nine and then Enterprise a little bit. And then, of course, they were the big bad villain in Star Trek Into Darkness. And some people, casual Star Trek fans, may only know about Section 31 from the movie Into Darkness. So on Picard this season, if you think about it, it looks like Ro, Worf, and by proxy, Raffi were working for Section 31, not Starfleet, because Starfleet has been taken over by the Changelings. So in this season of Picard, Section 31 are the good guys. That's the first time that's ever happened. And that could be a sign that as a whole, they're trying to get Section 31 into the minds of fans of Star Trek. So you don't immediately think of Section 31 as a villain. It's more gray, not just black and white. And that's really where Section 31 lies. So I think there's definitely a possibility that we could see a Section 31 series in the future. I don't know how much it's going to cost to get Michelle Yeoh back. I know she's worth it, but I don't know how much it's going to cost. So that could be something that's holding it up. But this is what Alex Kurtzman had to say about the future of a Section 31 series. He said this: "I can tell you that we're still very excited about Section 31, and that's all I will say." So again, kind of a brush off. I mean, that's kind of like me saying, like, yeah, I'd love a Section 31 series, but I have no news about it. And I think that he has a very similar perspective right there. So nothing really, I think, about Section 31. I think it's still on the table, but I don't know if they're going to do it. I don't think that this is at all a confirmation. I know I saw a couple of sites go with, oh, Section 31 news, it's still, it's still coming. I don't really think that this is a comment on that, but, to each their own. But what do you think about this news? What would you like to see in the future of Star Trek? Do you want to see a continuation with the characters on the Titan? Do you want to see a movie? Do you want to see a Section 31 series? Me, I'll watch all of them if they make sense. To me, the one that makes the least amount of sense is the film. The one that has, I think, the highest ceiling is probably that 2 or 3 hour event, and just doing like 2 or 3 of those. A lot of people like the short treks. People forget that in the first and second season of Discovery, we kind of had these episodes which were really standalone, but kind of tied into either characters' pasts or futures, or, even the ships on the shows. And Akiva Goldsman was responsible for a lot of those. So I think that, that's a good idea to bring back too. But let me know, what do you think about the future of Star Trek in this context? So speaking specifically about one of these ideas, I want to talk about the Star Trek Legacy series. Now, if you're not familiar, as I mentioned, initially this was kind of pitched as Star Trek Titan, just following the characters that are introduced this season on Picard. But now it's being called Star Trek Legacy thanks to Terry Matalas. In a tweet, he put out this. He said, "In case you're wondering, Star Trek Legacy is what I'd call a spin-off show from Star Trek Picard, a 25th century show that explores the last generation and the next." So he's already got an idea in mind, obviously, about where he'd like to go with these characters. He's worked with them at least for 2 years on this show. And then, of course, he has a history with the franchise as well. So, he's obviously on board. But again, he's a writer, he's a producer, he's a show creator. So, of course, he's going to want to get his ideas out there. That doesn't really surprise me, or should anyone else. And with that in mind, a few of the actors have come out and said that they're behind it too. I know that Jerry Ryan has said in the past that she's all for continue on with this character Seven. I think that Seven is now a much more complex character than she was on Voyager. So I think a lot more fans would like to see her back. They like a lot. I think a lot of fans like the changes that they've made with Seven. Recently, LeVar Burton was on The View, which Whoopi Goldberg, of course, is one of the hosts on, and she played Guinan. She brought up this Star Trek Legacy idea to him, and he had this to say: "What the writers have done is they have really set it up well. You've got the next generation of the next generation. The LaForge sisters, one's an engineer, the other's a pilot. We got Jack Crusher, 7 of 9. It makes a lot of sense. So I guess in his mind, he wouldn't be a part of this new series, but these characters would be. And I think that as far as the legacy characters, you definitely want to walk a line and not just make this Star Trek Picard Part 2 or Star Trek 7 or Star Trek Riker. If you're going to go a different way, really commit to that and don't make it about just the legacy characters. I think you really have to make it about the next generation of the next generation, like Mr. Burton pointed out. So I think that that's a really smart thing to say. There's also a petition on the site change.org that had over 12,000 signatures on it when I was recording this podcast to have this show made. In 2019, a similar petition was set up concerning the crew of the Enterprise featured on the second season of Discovery, and that got up to 30,000 signatures. And of course, then we got Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, it's not really known how much effect that petition had on the show being made. I mean, 30,000 signatures, I don't think sounds like a lot. 12,000 signatures, obviously less than half of that. But I don't know, how effective these petitions are. This petition in particular was set up by a YouTube channel, which I'm not a huge fan of. I believe that they have been quite disingenuous in the past, and they have connections to other channels like Nerderotic that I think are much worse. But anyway, having said that, I don't know how effective this petition will be. So me personally, looking at this series from a fan's perspective and a critic's perspective, this is why I think it could work. For one, the starting cast is good. I mean, like I just mentioned, Jerry Ryan as Seven. I think that her character has really grown a lot and is a better character now to center a show around than she was on Voyager. I think that Todd Stashwick has been awesome as Captain Liam Shaw. I really hope that he does not have any character development this season and they keep him kind of like a douche. I mean, if he calls, Seven, Commander Seven, that's fine. I'm fine with that. But anything past that, any hugs or handshakes, I think is a bridge too far. I think that Todd Stashwick needs to keep Liam Shaw as a dipshit from Chicago. And that's what I want to see. I love him as that character. So I would watch a show with him as a captain, as this character. I like what he's doing so far. And as far as Seven goes, talks for a show featuring her have been going on basically since Picard got started. I think that fans really quickly started to realize that this was a really better version of this character. And Jerry Ryan's a great actress. I've seen her in other stuff. She was really good in a show called Warehouse 13. I don't know if you've seen that show before, but she appeared in an episode of that and she was great. But I think that she's a great actress and she's really killing it as Seven this season. So having her on this series makes a lot of sense. And there is some cachet there because people have been talking about it for a while. Also, the third season of Picard will almost definitely be the most popular season for the series. Now, it is true that it's not popular because of the cast on the Titan. It's popular because of the returning characters from the Next Generation. But if people watch the show and they learn to like these characters on the Titan, they can kind of piggyback off that success and, and be that much more popular. I think we saw this in the original, when the original shows came out, you always had characters from one show showing up on another. The first episode of DS9, you had characters from Next Generation. First episode of Voyager, you had characters from Deep Space Nine. So I think that, having that kind of segue, it works really well. Star Trek's done it before, and I think that this season is a great way to do it. Now for different reasons why I think it wouldn't work. The biggest reason, and I think that this is pretty obvious, is that streaming services as a whole just seem to be in a state of chaos right now. Good shows are getting canceled left and right. I mean, of course, Discovery just got canceled. You can say what you will about that, how good that show was, but it is getting canceled. And, it's hard to make a big budget show right now with this kind of environment. I think that that's another reason why Alex Kurtzman is bringing up, doing event shows and not 10 episodes, not films, because there's less of a budgetary concern there. So I think that, that could stop a new Star Trek series like this coming because, everything is so up in the air. Paramount's seeing some popularity with Taylor Sheridan series like Yellowstone, and they've got that series with Jeremy Renner too. So I don't know how invested Paramount is right now in making big budget Star Trek. And I think that Picard is mostly done using the volume, like a big green screen kind of environment. They don't go on location a lot. So I'm sure that might keep it down. But I don't know. I think that really the budget concerns of making a new big budget series may stop a new series based on the characters from the Titan. And then finally, I think that a new series like this, it might be too much like Strange New Worlds. There needs to be something about Star Trek Legacy that makes it special. You could argue that if you do have these like character arcs with like Worf for 3 episodes, and then you check on, Dr. Crusher for 3 episodes, and then B'Elanna Torres out of nowhere for 3 episodes. That might be a good way to do it. But if you just have a crew, boldly going out into space, it's very similar to Strange New Worlds, especially if it's not serialized. Picard is serialized, Strange New Worlds is not. So if you make a new Star Trek Legacy show not serialized, then again, it's just so much like Strange New Worlds. Remember just a year ago when we thought, Star Trek was in its heyday and we have 5 series on the books and 1 film in production. We had Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Picard. All those shows, if you think about them, are different. Discovery takes place way in the future. Strange New Worlds takes place before Kirk. Lower Decks takes place after Voyager. Prodigy takes place after Lower Decks. Picard takes place after both of them. So there is a lot of difference there. Not to mention that 3 of them are live action series, 2 of them are animated series. So there's definitely differences in tone, differences in the way they tell stories. And even when we had, the Next Generation and then Deep Space Nine came on, while the Next Generation was still creating new seasons, Deep Space Nine was a lot different than Next Generation. The first season of Deep Space Nine even gave Avery Brooks a chance as Benjamin Sisko to say it plain out, I'm not Picard. That show was nothing like the Next Generation. And the more it went on, the less it became like the Next Generation, really. And then you had Voyager come on while Deep Space Nine was still on. And Voyager was probably more similar to the Next Generation than it was Deep Space Nine, but still you had Voyager in the Delta Quadrant. You kind of did the same thing with Voyager that they did with Discovery by putting them in the 32nd century. Voyager was in an area of space that nobody had ever been before. So outside of the, random encounter, you really were meeting alien species and characters and going to places that we never would have heard of or seen in a prior Star Trek series. So again, there will be a time difference. Obviously, there's a couple of centuries, I think, separating the crew of Strange New Worlds and what's going on now in Picard. But I don't think that's enough to make it that much different. I think that you really need to have something that makes this show stand alone and isn't just like a more updated version of Strange New Worlds, because then you weaken both properties. You don't just hurt a new series, you hurt Strange New Worlds. And as I mentioned, Strange New Worlds is now the flagship of this franchise. Picard is going to be gone in 4 weeks. Discovery is going to be gone next year. So then you're just left with Lower Decks and Prodigy as of right now, along with Strange New Worlds. Lower Decks and Prodigy are both animated series. They're probably going for different audiences. So really, it's Strange New Worlds or bust right now for Star Trek. So I think that you don't want to do anything to hurt Strange New Worlds, which is probably another concern with making another series that really I don't think stands out alone that much from Strange New Worlds. Picard is different because not only do we have the legacy characters, but we also have a serialized storyline. You have 10 episodes that are all kind of moving towards one thing. Strange New Worlds, if you watch the first season, is not like that. I mean, you've got Pike and you've got characters that have things going on. They had Dr. Mbenga had a storyline with his daughter that got resolved, that was kind of touched on a little bit here and there. But I wouldn't really consider that serialized storytelling like you have with Picard on this season. So again, you just gotta have something that makes Star Trek Legacy stand out from Strange New Worlds. And saying that, well, Legacy will be serialized, I think that's a wrong way to go. I don't think that Star Trek fans really want to see serialized storytelling. So in my opinion, I think that there's a way you can make it work, but I don't think it's in the conventional way of, a series and 10 episodes and we're just following them, doing stuff in the 25th century. I think that it works better as, maybe it's a Worf special, like something happens in the Klingon Empire, or something happens with the remnants of the Dominion War. And now, the ship and these characters have to help Worf or have to help Worf and Janeway. You know, Janeway is another character that could come back in live action. She is a main character on Prodigy right now, but that is an animated series, so they could bring Kate Mulgrew back, but you don't want it to be Star Trek Janeway. Like I said, you don't want Star Trek Picard Part 2. I don't think that works. So there's really a thin line, I think, for success on this show. Would I love to see it? Yeah, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I don't want to see something that's destined to fail. I don't want to see something that people are going to say they want now and then a year from now rag on, you know. So I don't know. I am not somebody that is convinced that Star Trek Legacy, again, as a 10 episode series, is the way to go. I think if Paramount can get Michelle Yeoh back, that a Section 31 series really is the best way, because again, it's Section 31 would be so much different than Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks and Prodigy. If you didn't have Star Trek at the beginning, you wouldn't even know that this series maybe was connected to these other series, you know, and people can say what they will about that. But I think that that's really the way you succeed, is you create something that is familiar and different. And Star Trek Legacy, I think, is too heavy on the familiar and too light on the different. That doesn't mean they can come up with a good idea, but just, you know, that one sentence pitch by Terry Matalas does not do it for me. And definitely a petition online isn't going to do it for me either. But, you know, we'll see what happens. But let me know, what do you think of the plans for a Star Trek Legacy series? Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm nuts? Do you think that a 10 episode series following Captain Shaw, Commander 7, and, you know, who knows who else will succeed? Let me know in the comments below. Well, that's all I have this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Remember, the best way to support me is to hit that like button right now. And to be honest with you, right now, March 27th is my birthday. So if you're watching this on March 27th and you want to do something nice, all you got to do is hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe as well, because I put out these videos all the time. Also, if you have not yet watched my breakdown of the 6th episode of the final season of Picard, titled The Bounty, you definitely should. It's got tons of Easter eggs. It's one of my longest Easter egg videos ever. So definitely check that out as well after you watch this video. But thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?